Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on this beautiful Thursday morning. The markets just continue to be something that's amazing each and every day. Yesterday, we had this strong start to the day. The markets looked like we were off to the races once again. Boy, the acceleration to the downside really hit in, specifically on the Dow. Actually, the NASDAQ just kind of kept on moving to the upside, but the Dow certainly got hit pretty hard. And that was something that I think stood out because we hadn't seen a whole lot of that of late, but it's interesting. There's no doubt about it. And the movement that we're seeing within the Dow, within the S&P, within the NASDAQ each and every day. Now, a lot of that are intraday moves. It might not be close to close a huge movement, but they certainly do stand out. So yesterday we did actually kind of rally back off, and maybe it was the Fed because it seemed like about the timing where we at least got off the lows. We still finished in negative territory on the Dow. But as I say, the NASDAQ just kept on moving to the upside, all-time highs. So for all those people who continue to come on all the major networks and talk about, well, it's time, the rotation is there, we're all going to value. I'm not really quite sure that's happened just yet. As a matter of fact, I think it's still all about quality. And I think oftentimes when people get so macro and they say, well, the whole rotation is doing this, that is just incorrect. And if you continue to watch, and as we are here each and every day talking about different areas of markets that are moving to the upside, yeah, they might make a pause. And we've seen a bit of a pause, obviously. Technology, some of those names, the Apples, and we go through that long list of the names that have hit the pause button. But at the same time, we've seen also all-time highs, it seems pretty consistently. Now we've backed off a little bit, but consistently in biotech. We've seen all-time highs in the semiconductors. So this whole idea that everybody's rotating and they're getting out of growth and they're only going to value is absolutely ludicrous to me. But it's a commentary that just goes on day after day after day. So it's great because, in my opinion, that helps create opportunity because we see the areas of the marketplace, especially through the unusual option activity, that can tell us, at least gives us, I think, some color as far as what some of the biggest on Wall Street are actually looking at. And we've talked about materials for a while. We've talked about energy for a while. And we've seen that move to the upside. We've been talking about these financials. They've had a pretty nice move as well. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other parts, especially in the NASDAQ, that can't move to the upside as well. So the volatility index, it's still just kind of hung around 22, 23, sort of in that sort of range. But the NASDAQ leaders, again, we've seen nothing but option paper. It's been unbelievable indications for us with PayPal. And I can tell you, in the last 3-4 trading sessions, I've been in PayPal. It's moved enough. I've been out of PayPal. Then I got back in it, PayPal. Then I got out of PayPal. Today was one of those days. Had a nice pop once again. But looking back to yesterday, that was one of the leaders. It was up about 4%. You had Workday moving to the upside, eBay moving to the upside, Microsoft, Salesforce, those kind of names. Some of those Chinese names, Baidu and JD and NetEase, all moving to the upside and powering the NASDAQ to some degree. The industrials were really part of the big drag that we were seeing yesterday on the Dow. And when you see some of that movement and you look over at Boeing and Honeywell and Caterpillar, and they weren't down significantly, but down about 1.5 or so, 1.25% across the board or more. That's going to move things definitely. And that's been an area that we have seen some pretty decent strength of late. So that it wasn't like they were getting smashed. They were just pulling back. And on that pullback, and I think you don't want to overreact because each and every day we see some movement. And today is another one of those days. Before I get that though, technology yesterday, that was pretty strong. It was pretty interesting to see some of the names, big names, Microsoft, Oracle, Adobe, those kind of names. And when I look over at energy and I look at that space, and it did ease back again yesterday. And we're looking at oil as it continues to rise to the upside, but we eased back a little bit in names like Cabot and Murphy and Diamondback, names in more of that beta category that are starting to get hit a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of bleeding into today. Yesterday, huge volumes once again, well over 30 million contracts, but not quite in that 40 million contract like we've seen, but we traded about 32.2 million contracts again yesterday. By the way, I got to point out for Tuesday, and I apologize we weren't able to do this live yesterday. It just didn't work out. And by the way, if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer whatever, and we'll do that towards the very end. But it is amazing that on Tuesday, the number of the volume in Apple. I was on the show at the halftime that day, and we had some incredibly large trades coming into Apple and monstrous buys to the upside. And at the end of the day on Tuesday, we finished with 3.3 million contracts just in Apple, just in Apple. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're really seeing right now, and some of the paper. We talk about this volumes all the time because it's important, because this is the growth area of the marketplace and the derivatives. And we continue to hammer that down because it's important that you understand that. And if you understand that, you've got to have a better understanding of it so that you can actually position yourself within that area of the marketplace and give yourself that opportunity. But it's going to take education, because you don't want to just jump in and get lucky early, because then you won't understand later why maybe things didn't work out. So it's a lot about the implied volatilities and all those Greeks. So the early indications today were pretty strong. We were looking at a Dow up about $1.25. We're looking at the NASDAQ up about 60 points and the S&P up about 18 points. We've basically just kind of holding right around in those levels since the opening, since the pre-market, and that's not a bad thing. But that's why we're seeing volatility just kind of ease back just a little bit, as we had that spike not too terribly too many days ago up towards 25. Here we are just sort of hanging in this range right around 22. So it makes sense given the kind of movement we're getting, but we are getting, as I say, a lot of intraday movement as well. Crude up and above 48. That's been a pretty nice move, a pretty solid and consistent move on a day in and day out basis. Gold and silver with a nice move to the upside as well. You've got gold up about 2% today. You've got silver up about 4.5%. We finally started seeing some of those SLV calls being bought again. Not as much over in gold, but we are seeing in silver, at least the other day, we did see a pretty good size buyer in there. I think it was Tuesday, as a matter of fact, because I think I mentioned that on the Fast Money on the 5 o'clock show, because I think that came a little bit later in the day, some of that paper. So some of those that are leading the Dow today, some of the usual suspects. You've got Visa, you've got Home Depot, we've got Walgreens, and we got Apple. And those are the names that are leading the Dow. And the Dow, as I say, up about triple digits and holding on to a pretty nice and a pretty solid, just holding in that space since we started in the first hour. Now, the NASDAQ, on the other hand, it's back for Moderna, and Moderna's back up, and it's up about 4% today. You got DocuSign, you've got Workday, you've got PayPal again, and it's just consistent. We've been seeing that option paper in a couple of these names, specifically PayPal, back to back to back. We've seen it in Vale. As a matter of fact, we're even seeing a little bit today as well, just as a little teaser. By the way, on top of that, when you looked coming into today, and we started into the day, when you look across the major sectors, pretty solid into the green across the board, nothing huge, all just moving in a pace. It seemed like about 0.5% or so to the upside. And that's healthy as well, because we're not just seeing just one category that's exploding and moving things. What we're seeing right now is a little bit more of that pause and rise to the upside from multiple areas, from the material space, which is the leader. But then you throw in financials that are kind of flat to red and not doing a whole lot. But you see healthcare up about 0.5%. You look over at consumer discretionary, that's up about 0.5%. So it's a nice sort of a mellowing move to the upside today, as people seem to be taking almost a little bit of a breather. And a lot of people today talking about Christmas rallies. We see those all the time, the Santa Claus rallies. Will we see that this year? Well, we've already had a pretty nice run, so we'll see. But you got the S&P trading right around that 3,700 level. Obviously, the Dow in that 30,000 level. And the NASDAQ, as I mentioned, hit new highs yesterday. So new highs, that means yesterday. It means with it up today, more new highs for the NASDAQ. So a pretty nice move to the upside. Some of the standouts for me that I think you just have to take note of is take a look at what's been going on with Eli Lilly. It has been one of those very quiet in the healthcare area that has just been moving to the upside. We talked about it just the other day in terms of the acquisition that they made in the biotech world, but just take a look at this name and just the fact that it just seems to be going up almost every single day. And I think it's worth noting, because I don't think we've heard a lot of commentary about that specific name. We hear a lot of the biotech names, Moderna and some of those names, but you also hear about Pfizer, obviously for the obvious reasons. But I think Lilly is something, if it hadn't have taken off as quick as it has, I probably would be in it. I'm not, and I'm kicking myself because I thought about it, didn't make the move, and it's just been going up, 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 up to the upside. I just to note that. But last thing is, when you look over at energy, some of the beta names, they're not working so well today. You look over at some of the integrated names, Chevron's down a little bit today, even though the price of oil is going a little bit higher. So it gives you a sense of the rapid move to the upside. And sometimes we have seen this before where we've taken a bit of a pause and even maybe a pullback. And that's a little bit of what we're looking at today. So unusual. We had 9 unusual option activities hitting in the first 30 minutes of the day, and that has continued to blossom into this first hour of the day. So what really stood out for me early, there's a couple of different names, and it was kind of difficult to go after which one that I really wanted to highlight, because sometimes I avoid the ones where the options are so expensive that most people aren't able to even think about wanting to participate when they see the unusual. So this one stands out because we've seen so much activity of late since the start of December and even going back into late November. But this is a stock that ran from 20, got up into the 25, 26 category, then pulled all the way back to 20 around again, 20, 22 bucks, but gap stores. And we're seeing more buying again. We've consistently seen a lot of activity in here looking for upside. So what did they buy? They're buying 5,000 of the December 24th expiring calls. They're the 20.5 calls. Those are just out of the money from where the stock's trading, because when these hit, the stock is trading about 20.25. They're going for about 45 cents. So not overly expensive, gives you a little bit of time, not a huge amount of time, but a little bit of time before these expire. They're not expiring tomorrow. They give you an extra week, but so we'll see how this plays out. And it's interesting because this is an area where we've seen that paper. The paper was great indicator for this stock as it ran to the upside. It had that big pullback, and then they started coming back once again with some pretty good, healthy paper buying once again. So let's get to a couple of questions and then we're going to have to run because I've gone a little longer than I expected to. Hey, Pete, hope you got to Naples. Your take on Riot. I trimmed some Riot. Riot has been a great run. It's a really incredible name. Matter of fact, Cal and I were talking beforehand. We were talking about Bitcoin and this crazy run that we've seen to the upside in there. And sorry that I didn't talk about this on the take, but I'm talking about it now, so I guess I am. Bitcoin's been on a run. I mean, a sprint to the upside and potential, because if you listen to a lot of the guys who've been right about Bitcoin, this is not over yet. The ride is not over. So it's been incredible. And a lot of the names that are connected to that sort of space have been moving pretty nicely, Riot being one of those names. I took off a little bit of that just yesterday. So that's kind of my take on Riot. I see somebody asking about Penn and DraftKings. I'm still in them. By the way, I'm still in DraftKings. I'm not in Penn right now, but I might be by the time we get off of this because, or just after I get done with the take. I've seen, that was one of those where I saw some very large, unusual option activity today. So that's a little teaser for you as too. So giving you a double. We got Gap stores and we got Penn. And it doesn't mean that you can't be in both, but I've been more leaning towards and trading more in DraftKings, both in the stock and then trading the calls, but holding onto the stock and selling against that. But I've been in Penn quite a bit as well. And this option paper I'm seeing today was large enough that I'm probably going to be back in Penn in the options as well. What do you think of the pharma here? Moderna, Novavax. So I love the pharma names. I love these biotech names. I know that the biotech has screamed to the upside. And there's a couple of names that have really been running that. And we had the downgrade just the other day, I believe, of Moderna from somebody who's been really, really right, but they also raised the price target. So that's always one of those interesting ones because it's a little bit almost of a hedge, but it does make sense. And I thought it was, we had him on Fast Money on Tuesday. So that was great. I love the pharmaceutical space still. I still own many of the different names. I'm in a couple of biotech names. One of them is Gilead, which has made an incredible number of acquisitions this year. And I've been talking about some of the acquisitions in that space, obviously the other day with Lilly, but if you look across, J&J's made acquisitions and we've seen so many others as well. So that's been very big. What else do we got here? Pete, what's up? I'm seeing a huge block in Plug. What are your thoughts? I've seen that too. I've seen a little bit of the paper in there. I'm less intrigued by it, but that means nothing. I just, for whatever reason, I have not been very fortunate in that name. So even though I see activity, oftentimes I don't, in names where it just doesn't seem to work for me, I just move on. And that's been one of those names where I just haven't had the success with that name as I have with others. So even though I see unusual in there, I oftentimes just pass over it. So it's just my own opinion. Love your fangs. What is going on the Facebook? You know, I don't understand the Facebook trade either as far as the old Fang, but my new Fang, was replacing Facebook with Freeport-McMoRan. And anybody who's been here with the Market Rebellion and they've heard us talk about that, we've been talking about materials for months and months and months. And it seems like people are starting to jump on the materials bandwagon. Materials have been not just started moving the last week or month. Materials have been moving for a while now. And I'll tell you, Freeport-McMoRan's been one of those names. US Steel's been one of those names. We've had some great moves. Vale is another one of those in that category that's been ripping to the upside, and that's been great. Freeport, I just think, is in a great spot. And the old adage was, when copper gets over 2, it's time to be in some of these names. Well, copper is well over 2. I believe it's over 3. And I think names like Freeport-McMoRan are going to do very well with that. By the way, Teck is another one of those names that does have exposure in a lot of different areas in the material space. And we've talked about that name and some of the unusual option activity that we've seen there of late also. Pete, are you buying Best Buy heading into Christmas? I have calls in Best Buy. I do not have the stock. And that was my strategy because I love the name, Minnesota company. They do a lot of things right. I think the management there has been first class. They've navigated through everything as best they can, and they've done extremely well. And a lot of that's because of e-commerce and what they were able to do with some of the bricks and mortar as well. But that's always a little bit more difficult. I love the name. I'm in the calls, but I'm not in the stock right now just because I think the calls give me a better opportunity from a risk reward perspective. Let's see what else I'll give it. Any particular sectors you are concerned about? That's a really great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not really sure that I have concerns about any sectors because oftentimes I'm looking at the individual names. And if I see enough individual names that are in that sector, it definitely perks up for me. But I don't know that I have overly have any concerns about a specific sector. There are stocks, we talk about some of these all the time, that are probably way in front of themselves. And I don't know that how you can possibly justify some of the valuations. And that gets to be an area where I'm constantly looking, saying I'll do options and I'll give myself the best opportunity for upside in some of those options. But when I look at some of these names, they are absolutely up in the stratosphere. Folks, we're going to jump now. I know it's been busy. I apologize about yesterday, but hopefully we made up for some of that with some of the question and answer today. And I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. I will be here with the take tomorrow, but I'll also be on the noon show tomorrow. And I got a great location. My hint, based in Atlanta. How about that? Giddy up. See you tomorrow.